Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 170, Hook, Line, and Stinker. The episode begins with Ash and the gang deciding to take a break in a nearby stream, having let out all their Pokemon to relax. Brock was brushing Vulpix's tail, Misty was watching Togepi, and Poliwhirl splash in the water. All the Pokemon were just having a time of their life, you know? Poliwhirl was having a bit too much fun, though, so Misty worried that it would go out too far and almost drown or some shit, even though it was a water Pokemon, so Misty warned it just not to go out too far, and Poliwhirl agreed as it gave her a wave. However, just then, a huge-ass Poliwrath appeared out of the water and fucking cold-cocked the Poliwhirl all the way out of the water. Ash and Brock watched on, extremely concerned at this point, as Misty ran over to Poliwhirl to comfort it. Just then, the Poliwrath's trainer named Andreas came up and immediately insulted Misty's Poliwhirl, calling it Poliweak for losing to his Poliwrath in one fucking hit. Andreas only proceeds to insult Poliwhirl further as it goes to hide behind Misty's legs in fear of both Andreas and the Poliwrath. Seeing Poliwhirl cower away only makes Andreas insult it more, stating that Poliwhirl would only be good if it evolved. Ash, Brock, and Misty all rise up to defend Poliwhirl, with Brock claiming that a Pokemon didn't need to evolve to be good. Andreas then continues to insult not only Poliwhirl, but Misty and the rest of her Pokemon as well, as he rebuttals that even if Poliwhirl could be naturally gifted if it wasn't evolved, it still proved that Misty was a bad trainer, as he had noticed that all of her other Pokemon were unevolved as well. Misty is immensely fed up by all of Andreas' bullshit by now, and challenges him to a battle like, oh, you think all my Pokemon are weak? Well, how about we battle? But all Andreas does is recall his Poliwhirl and say they didn't have time to battle right now, as he had something else to go do. Alright, fucking coward. You're gonna make fun of Poliwhirl for being a coward, but you're cowering away from the battle? Anyways, even minutes after Andreas had left, the comments that he had made were still absolutely making Misty absolutely fuming. In an attempt to calm her down, Brock tried his best to assure her that Poliwhirl was still a good Pokemon, and the dude was just full of shit. But as he was trying to convince her of this, they then spotted a whole bunch of people with fishing rods walking down the same path that they were, as they had since set off from the lake. Ash obviously wonders what the fuck all these trainers were here for, so he asks one of them why they were all carrying fishing rods, questioning if there was a good fishing spot nearby, and the boy that he was questioning replies that he was going for the annual seeking catching competition. Being intrigued by this competition, Ash and the gang decide to follow along, where they eventually follow all the trainers to another nearby lake, and they're all greeted by the announcer of the competition. The announcer instantly announces the rules. Trainers could use any rods or lures that they wanted, but the seeking had to be captured in a specialized lake ball. Also, only one Pokemon would be allowed to help out the trainer with any of the catching, and at the end of the contest, the winner would be determined by whoever had the heaviest seeking, and as a reward, they would receive a trophy and a year's supply of chocolate bars. Upon hearing the rules, Ash remarks how similar it was to the bug-catching contest that he did, aside from the exception that, at least with the bug-catching contest, you could catch any bug Pokemon. With this, you just had to catch a seeking. The announcer then clarifies one more thing, being that since there was only one lake ball, you could only enter in one seeking for your final judgment, though added that you could try and catch other seeking as practice. Also adding that the one Pokemon that you got to accompany you still had to be registered. You couldn't just pick it out willy-nilly, so that way they could prove that you only used one. Anyways, because of Ash noticing the similarities to the bug-catching contest and how much he enjoyed that, he decides to enter this contest as well, though questions which Pokemon he should use to help him, with Brock suggesting that he should use Pikachu since it was an electric type, which would be good against Seeking. So, Ash goes to the registration table to register Pikachu. Right as Ash and the gang go up to the registration table, however, they then spot none other than Andreas, who was entering his Poliwrath. Before Misty can scream at him, Ash and the gang overhear a whole bunch of other competitors talking about how Andreas was the returning Seeking contest champion, indicating that he had won the contest beforehand. When the trainers started to claim that Andreas was unbeatable, this motivated Misty to join the competition as well, so she could do her best to beat Andreas and prove him wrong about her Poliwhirl, and all her other Pokemon for that matter. Brock warns her that she was merely just being impulsive, and probably wouldn't actually be able to win the fishing contest, especially if Andreas had won the last one, but Misty rebuttals that she knows what she was doing, as she used to fish a whole lot back home. And so, Ash and Misty both enter, entering their Pikachu and Poliwhirl respectively. And they asked Brock if he wanted to enter as well, but Brock was too preoccupied with staring at the registration lady, who he had developed an instant crush on, leading Misty to drag him away by the ear as usual. And also insists that instead of him wasting his time simping, he do something useful and drive the boat that Ash and Misty were going to ride to catch the Seeking in the water. Brock complies, and the three of them, along with Poliwhirl and Pikachu, hop inside of a boat, with Brock taking the driver's seat, and soon all of the other competitors hop in boats as well, including Andreas, who drives up to them in his boat, stopping them right as Brock was about to drive away. As soon as he arrives, he proceeds to make fun of Misty's Poliwhirl yet again, calling it weak, with Misty rebutting that Poliwhirl wasn't weak just because it wasn't a bully like Andreas was. Damn! Andreas merely laughs at this insult though. And he only laughs more, as Psyduck angrily jumps out of its Pokeball to try and defend Poliwhirl, only to land in the water and almost drown since it couldn't swim. Andreas then gives your typical, I'm gonna win, not you, spiel, and then drives off, as Misty congratulates Psyduck for not sinking in the water and drowning, as she recalls him back into his Pokeball. Just then, a horn sounds over the speaker, signifying that the contest had begun. So, Ash and Misty put their fishing rods into the lake and begin fishing, with Misty commenting to both Ash and Poliwhirl that they were going to have to be patient, as fishing always took a while, and fuck yeah it did. Except for Andreas though, because he managed to catch a Seeking almost instantly, and began to reel it up. Misty was fuming at Andreas' luck, as Andreas proceeded to order his Poliwrath to attack the Seeking with Double Slap, and then after that was done, he was able to catch the Seeking in the lake ball. Just kidding, he didn't catch it in the lake ball, he only caught it in a regular Pokeball, because he decided to release it, complaining that it wasn't nearly big enough, and that he was just warming up with that little small fry. This leads Misty to angrily taunt back that Andreas would never find a Seeking that was as big as his goddamn mouth. Damn, fire roast right there. But Andreas didn't care, as he simply boated away, looking for this huge-ass Seeking that he desired. Meanwhile, Team Rocket, in just simply casual disguises this time, weren't spying on Ash and the gang for once, no. They had decided to enter this Seeking catching competition with no nefarious intentions whatsoever. They just wanted that year's supply of chocolate bars, as James said that he was so hungry that he would have just ate the wrappers. Jessie was the one doing most of the actual fishing, thanks to what she called the Jessie lure. You know how Misty had a lure that looked like herself? Well, Jessie had one as well, and she claimed that it would easily catch the Seeking because it was so beautiful, much like her, that the Seeking couldn't resist it. After an hour, though, Meowth commented that the Seeking obviously didn't like Jessie's beauty whatsoever, as they had gotten no bites, suggesting that Jessie was so ugly that she was scaring off all the Seeking. This made Jessie go absolutely furiously mad that Meowth would insult her beauty like that, as she slams her rod down in the water, hoping to fucking hit a Seeking or something, and James restrains her, only for her to break free and yell that if a beautiful lure wasn't going to work on the Seeking, then she would use an ugly lure instead, a Meowth lure. Meowth questions how there was a Meowth lure modeled after him that he didn't know about, leading Jessie to clarify that there was no such thing as an actual Meowth lure. Instead, she was going to have Meowth be the literal bait, as she proceeded to put a breather on his mouth and tie him to a rope with a stone on it so that he would immediately go down to the water instead of purely float, and throw him in the water, instructing him to catch a Seeking and use scratch on it if he encountered one to weaken it. As Jessie and James assure him that they would get the chocolate for sure if Meowth did this, Meowth didn't care at this point. He was super uncomfortable and he just wanted to get the fuck out of the water. But then he spotted a Seeking, so he went up to it to go scratch it. But unfortunately, it began swimming away, leading him to give chase and demand that it come back. However, he then got himself hooked to someone else's lure. This lure belonged to none other than Misty. This leads Misty to believe she had hooked a Seeking, so she begins to pull it up, although she has severe difficulty, as Jessie had noticed Meowth being pulled away and tried to pull back Meowth into the boat. So this resulted in somewhat of a tug-of-war between Jessie and Misty. The tug-of-war, unfortunately, causes the now super uncomfortable Meowth from being dragged in two directions. Rock that was tied to him to get sent down to the bottom of the lake, which meant that he got stuck to the bottom as well, which led Misty and Jessie's boats to begin getting pulled towards each other because all of the weight was concentrated downwards, so it was pulling them forwards, if that makes sense. The struggle also causes Meowth to lose his breathing machine, and as a result of the struggle, both boats crash into each other. Now that Meowth wasn't being pulled in two directions, he takes the opportunity to use Fury Swipes to free himself from both lures, cutting off both of the lines. As for how Team Rocket and Misty were doing above the surface, Jessie had spotted Misty and Ash upon crashing into them, so she instantly wanted to get away, simply apologizing as her and James sped away in their boat, thankfully for them not being recognized. Misty happily accepts Jessie's apology, unbeknownst to her that it actually was Jessie, but her good mood is ruined as she realizes that Meowth had cut her lure, and therefore she had lost what she still believed was a Seeking on the end of the line, leading Ash to mention that it was probably a catfish that broke her line, because they were notorious for doing that. Ironically, not referring to Meowth, even though he technically was a catfish in that scenario. Also, I guess catfish exist in the Pokemon world? Anyways, Andreas then came by in his boat and noticed how Misty's line was broken and mocked her that she could take home first prize in a fishing rod catching competition, referring to how all she had in her hand was a broken fishing rod, instead of a single Seeking. Before Misty can scold him though, he simply drives off once again. Meanwhile, Meowth had just barely managed to make it back to Team Rocket's boat without drowning due to not having his breathing device and complains about how bad of an idea Jessie had. I don't think Jessie really cared at this point. Soon after this, Misty noticed that the wind direction was changing, and notes that Seeking liked to head in the direction of the wind, so she urges Brock to go that way as well, as he speeds the boat forward. However, Andreas had the same idea when he noticed the wind was changing, so he was racing towards the same spot, leading the two of them to race toward the spot, with Misty shouting that they weren't going fast enough, so she pushed Brock out of the driver's seat and took over herself. As they approach one another, they begin to bump each other's boats in an attempt to capsize each other, and while doing so, they don't realize that they were actually heading towards Team Rocket's boat, and they were about to capsize them, so Brock instructs Misty to try to turn to avoid their boat. And while she does, Team Rocket still gets capsized, as Andreas simply uses their boat as a ramp, driving over it, causing a huge wave that flipped Team Rocket over. Misty drives over to make sure Team Rocket were okay, who were now floating in the water, and they merely just lie that they were, as they try their best to hide their faces so that Misty wouldn't recognize them. And they even hide Meowth under the water yet again so that Misty didn't spot him, much to his dismay, as Meowth was still getting over his previous incident in the water. Misty then drives away, apologizing for what Andreas did, as Team Rocket breathed a sigh of relief. They still weren't discovered. Later, Misty then spots a huge rock in the middle of the water, and states that that usually meant that it was a good fishing spot. However, Andreas had the same idea, and he was already at the rock. Andreas taunts Misty yet again that she would not be able to find a Seeking, and tells her that she could have one of the ones that he didn't want, implying that he would catch all the Seeking in the area first. However, this was immediately proved wrong, as Ash then got a bite, and proceeded to reel it in. He then had Pikachu weaken the Seeking with his Thunderbolt, and then he threw the Lake Ball to successfully capture the Seeking, leading Misty and Brock to compliment Ash on him and Pikachu's teamwork, and for Misty to rub it in Andreas' face that he didn't catch all of the Seeking after all. However, Andreas simply laughs, as he states that he had just hooked on a bigger Seeking, and tells his Poliwrath to get ready to attack it. Poliwrath then uses Mega Punch and Double Slap as the Seeking comes out of the water, severely weakening it, allowing Andreas to catch it in a Lake Ball, claiming that it was the biggest one he had ever caught, and it was a guaranteed winner for the contest. taunting that Misty better hurry up if she wanted to get a second place seeking, as the alarm then sounded from the loudspeaker, stating that there was only 10 minutes left in the competition. This led Misty to panic, as she didn't know what to do when she remembered that she had her secret weapon, a powerful lure that was extremely lucky, called the Super Misty Lure version 4. The lure that resembled her. For some reason, this lure actually seemed to have magical powers, as soon as she passed it in, it immediately caught a gigantic fucking seeking, and it almost pulled her into the water, but she used all her might to reel it in. And she sent in her Poliwhirl to weaken it, although Poliwhirl gets unfortunately slapped back by Seeking's tail. Although Poliwhirl was able to rebound off of the boat to double slap the Seeking, allowing Misty to catch it since it was weakened enough, using her lake ball. Right as the competition officially came to a close. Right in the nick of time, goddamn. Breathing a sigh of relief, Misty thanks Poliwhirl for all of its help, stating that it wasn't weak, and returns back to shore, where all the other competitors now were, including all of the ones who had failed to catch even a single Seeking to enter, as they all got a commemorative badge as a reward for trying their best. Team Rocket were among these competitors who only got the commemorative badge, and James was enamored by it, as he just thought that it looked cool, but Meowth and Jessie were extremely bitchy, stating that they could have actually caught a Seeking if Ash and the gang didn't get involved. Meowth then brings up how he still really wanted that goddamn chocolate, leading Jessie to come up with the idea to steal both the chocolate and the first place trophy. Anyways, now that everyone who didn't catch a Seeking had been eliminated, it was time to do the actual weigh-ins to see who caught the biggest Seeking, and when it came to Andreas' turn, his turned out to weigh 55 kilograms, the heaviest so far, and he was about to win the contest, as there were seemingly no other competitors left who had rushed up to weigh their Seeking. However, Misty came in at the last second and stated that she had caught a really big Seeking, and when she weighed it, it turned out to be 55 kilograms as well, meaning that it was a tie. This obviously pisses Andreas off, as he was about to get praised for winning 2 times in a row. But Misty simply questioned how the tie was going to be broken, with the announcer revealing that it was going to be broken by both trainers using the Pokémon that they had registered to battle each other in a water Pokémon battle. Utilizing a stadium on the water that Ash remarked looked like the one he battled Mandy with, Andreas sends out his Poliwrath, and Misty sends out her Poliwhirl, and the battle begins, as Brock warns Misty that Poliwhirl would have the disadvantage, obviously. But right as the battle begins, and Poliwhirl and Poliwrath start attacking each other, Team Rocket shows up as smoke fills the area. Team Rocket used the smoke to their advantage to send Meowth down using a fishing rope to grab the chocolate. However, Misty and Andreas then command their Pokémon to use Water Gun on Meowth, causing him to drop all the chocolate that he just picked up. Unfortunately, Meowth was already being lifted up back into the Meowth balloon with the chocolate as he dropped it, so that meant that the chocolate was flying down to the ground and would all shatter if it hit it. Oh no! Thankfully, Ash sent out his Bulbasaur and had him use Vine Whip to retrieve the chocolate before it landed. Yay! With Team Rocket distracted from their chocolate being stolen, Ash takes the opportunity to have Pikachu use Thunderbolt and send Team Rocket blasting off, so the battle between Misty and Andreas could begin once again. Andreas instantly starts off by having his Poliwrath use Submission, which sends Poliwhirl flying into the air, leaving Ash surprised, as he didn't think that a Poliwhirl or its evolved forms could use any fighting moves, but Brock informs him that Poliwrath could once it evolved. Poliwhirl is seemingly already knocked out at this point, leading Andreas to claim that he had already won with a single attack, but at the last second, Poliwhirl gets back up. Although it doesn't attack back, it was frightened, so it merely runs behind Misty in fear, leading Misty to tell it to have more confidence. To further encourage Poliwhirl, Psyduck, Goldeen, and Staryu all come out of their Pokeballs, and Goldeen and Staryu use Water Gun on Poliwhirl to cool it down, essentially telling it to just relax and remember that it could win if it really tried. Misty decides to give Poliwhirl some encouragement as well, stating that he had to win because Andreas insulted all of her other Pokemon, and all of the other Pokemon had just stood up to defend Poliwhirl, so Poliwhirl had to do the same for them. She also told Poliwhirl to get all of Andreas' comments out of his head, such as him not being evolved, reminding him that he could still do good even if he wasn't evolved. She finally instructs it to prove that it wasn't a wimp, which gives the Poliwhirl enough motivation to use Bubble on the Poliwrath. Andreas claims that Poliwhirl's efforts would be futile, but Poliwhirl then responds by launching a Mega Punch, leading Andreas to strike with the same attack, but Poliwhirl was able to dodge the Mega Punch and then fire at Poliwrath once again with both Bubble and Water Gun, with the Water Gun being powerful enough to knock Poliwrath out, winning Misty the battle. Yay! The announcer officially declares Misty as the winner of the entire contest, leading Misty to jump for joy with her Poliwhirl, stating that it wasn't a wimp after all, and it had proved itself, leading Andreas to even admit the same thing, saying that he was sorry for calling Poliwhirl weak. Huh, that was a very quick switch up, my dude. Misty surprisingly accepts Andreas' apology, although she didn't really focus on him that much, as she immediately walked away from him to go claim her reward of the chocolate and the trophy. She was more fascinated by the chocolate, as she debated how she was going to divide it all up between her, Brock's family, her sisters, Tracy, Professor Oak, Ash's mom, Togepi, and Pikachu. Notice how Ash wasn't mentioned there? This leads him to get severely depressed. Hopefully he'll get over it next episode.